All right, welcome back with a quick little news of the day video here for you guys, and we have a lot to go over today, and we've got some pretty exciting news and also some much awaited news regarding the whole situation in Eastern Europe right now that I will eventually get into. But before I do that, I just want to give you guys a quick little reminder that I'm going to be resuming my power rankings every single Friday starting tomorrow, now that we are in the actual tour. However, it is going to be a little bit of a strange video. Due to the fact that Eastern Europe is not playing any matches currently, I will not be including any sort of Eastern Europe team in the power rankings. There's just no realistic way that I can compare them to any other team right now until we actually see them play. And I'm also not going to be including any team coming in from the lower division that hasn't played any matches in the upper division, which by the time I make this video, which should be tomorrow night, around this time that I'm uploading this one, hopefully, by that point, I think only 3 teams will have not played yet, those being Dog Champ and then the 2 teams from China. So anyways, I thought I would just let you guys know before we get into it to be on the lookout for that. And if you don't want to miss it, subscribe. And of course, all the sources for everything that I talk about in this video in the description down below if you're at all curious about anything at all. All right, kicking things off, we now have some exciting news. Of course, we had the fiasco with the first major that got canceled, and leading up to it, we were getting more and more suspicious about the fact that we hadn't heard anything regarding a location, regarding a date, regarding a tournament organizer, and we ended up not having a first major. Well, a few weeks ago, we ended up getting a date and a location for the second major, the one that's going to be going after this second tour, and now we finally have a location, a tournament organizer, and a date for the final major of the year that's going to be taking place at the end of Tour 3. That is going to be the last tournament in the DPC before TI-11, and that is going to be the Arlington Major in Texas, United States, and that's going to be from August 4th to August 14th, which again means that TI very likely to be in October once again, if not maybe even later. But yes, very exciting news. We have a date, we have a tournament organizer. We're not going to have any more of this crap with the first major being canceled and stuff like that, which thank God for. And we'll see if these majors end up having to have any sort of accommodations or changes to their format if Eastern Europe doesn't end up having any way that they can safely continue their tour. Because of course, Eastern Europe is still a pretty big part of the Dota Pro scene, and the fact that they're not able to play right now or potentially compete at this next major is pretty alarming. And so we'll see what Valve does, but we have actually gotten news that Valve has been actively reaching out to many of the teams in this division. It's unclear whether or not they're also talking to lower division teams. My guess is that they're not prioritizing the lower division teams nearly as much as the upper division teams, just because the lower division teams are not playing for major spots. They're not playing for DPC points. There's just straight up not as much on the line for them. But Valve has come out and they've expressed all of their needs to actually keep this scene going, and what they would need from each and every team to actually get this Tour 2 on its feet and get these teams to majors. The first of which is that all of these teams are going to need to get themselves in a position where they're going to be able to play all 7 of their series in any time slot possible. And that's likely due to the fact that because they're starting late, they're going to have to cram matches and finish and crunch their schedule down to maybe just a couple weeks, maybe 3, depending on how long this takes, and play all their matches very, very quickly. So these teams need to have open schedules. The second of which, and this is why I'm more leaning towards the fact that this may only be going for upper division teams, is that needs to also be the case, and teams need to be able to make it to the major. They need to be in a position that they can actually realistically make it to the major. And if they're not in a position that they can safely fly there, or if they're not in a position where they can get visas to fly there, then they won't be able to actually go forward with this tour. So we'll see if teams are able to do this. We'll see how long this takes. We've already started to see some teams leaving their current locations to get away from everything that's going on right now into somewhere more safe. For example, Team Spirit, who has recently relocated over to Serbia to boot camp. They're possibly even moving somewhere else just so that their visas can, they can get more help with their visas and stuff like that. But we'll see how long this ends up taking. Again, hopefully this can all happen very safely. Teams should not be prioritizing Dota over their own safety right now, but we'll have to see how this ends up going. Again, it's going to be pretty interesting for Eastern Europe if they do manage to get the second tour going. And once we get some more news, I'll be the first one to tell you guys all about it. All right, now moving on to some more uplifting news. We have the inaugural tournament for the Commonwealth Esports Championships going to be taking place in Birmingham, August 6th and 7th. And if you're asking what is the Commonwealth Esports Championships, well, it is going to be the first version of it, where essentially they're going to be taking in a bunch of not like non-pros or like maybe tier 2, tier 3 players and like young high school or university players to come together in mini tournaments to play in a miniature series during August. This obviously will not be including any sort of tier 1 teams, not only because this is meant to be focused on younger players, more up and coming players and stacks of players, but also this is going to be taking place during the Arlington major. So not going to be possible for any of the big names teams to actually make it here. But regardless, that should be a really fun one. And if this is something that piques your interest, amateur Dota, highly recommend checking that out in August. Again, this is going to be the first tournament for it, and hopefully this becomes more of a tradition. I think watching young players play Dota and get together and seeing all these young stacks make big waves, fantastic for the scene. All right, moving on now, we have some unfortunate news now, and I feel like I'm constantly going back and forth between great news and not so great news, but we've heard the unfortunate news that joinDOTA, the website, the forum, many things at this point, is going to be shutting down on the end of the month, March 31st, which is very unfortunate. joinDOTA is obviously a very huge part of not only the game, but the community as well. They hosted the first ever international, and since then, they have done numerous things in which you can read all about it on their website. They kind of have like a little bullet point timeline of all the important things that they've done around the scene, and I'd highly recommend checking it out. It's really sad to see them go, but they did mention that they're possibly looking into doing some other things behind the scenes that isn't related to joinDOTA, so hopefully this isn't the last that we see from the people working on this website, but it is still pretty sad to see this website go down. So feel free to check that out, link in the description once again. Finally now, moving on to some more actual like esports player related business here, stuff that I'm usually going to be covering. We have an update, sort of an update coming out from the whole Team Orca situation. Of course, a few days ago, I think it was a week ago now, we had the permanent banning of Team Orca and a 5 stack of players coming in through the open qualifiers known as Apex. This was due to the fact that players on Orca and Apex were sharing accounts. Thus, there was a lack of competitive integrity and there was permanent bans issued for all 10 players, all 10 accounts involved in that scandal. After that, we saw some statements coming out from players like VT Faded on Team Orca, talking about how there wasn't any match fixing involved because that was something that Beyond the Summit was also accusing them of, but it still didn't excuse the whole thing that they were sharing accounts, which already, even if there isn't match fixing, is not something that you're supposed to be doing. So there wasn't really much development from that, but now we've actually gotten a statement from the manager of Team Orca, who was kind of the mastermind behind this, although I don't know if this statement is going to actually end up changing anything here, and I'll get into what happened. So basically, and this is linked in the description if you want to read for yourself, I'm just paraphrasing. Basically, the manager for Team Orca was kind of running a little thin on funds, and he was having a hard time keeping Apex together and Orca together, mainly Apex, who was coming in through those open qualifiers, had a decent amount of success, and then 2 players on the team ended up having a feud and both of them left and there were no replacements. It was obviously in the midst of the open qualifiers. It was impossible to find any sort of replacement that was actually going to bring any sort of success to this Apex team, and the manager, being desperate given the fact that he was going through some financial struggles and this was his investment, he decided to ask members on Orca to play for him, and he sort of put it in a way where he was kind of threatening to terminate the contracts. And given that this is someone in a higher power, that doesn't really give the players much of an option of saying no. So a few of the players on Orca did use those accounts. They did try to come through, and that's when they ended up getting caught. Now, this does sort of remove some of the blame from the players, but at the same time, the players could have reported this before they knew it. And it kind of puts this whole thing in a weird position, and I'm curious to know what you guys think about this. I'm not really going to go any further on that, but I don't see this getting any bans lifted or anything like that. I still think the players were complicit with what was going on. They knew what was happening, and they didn't say anything until they got caught, which always looks pretty bad. So anyways, I would love to hear you guys' thoughts. Again, his statement is in the comments down below if you want to read that. I just paraphrased it. And finally, ending off on a good news here, we got a stack in Southeast Asia that made it through those open qualifiers and looked quite good coming in through those open qualifiers. That was, of course, Chubbyboiz that have now been signed by RSG Esports, which is fantastic news for them. I love when these, five-man, unknown, tier 2, tier 3 players and teams get picked up by orgs, because it just means more stability for the scene, more stability for those players, and hopefully it ends up being something that can help these players play the best as they can and accelerate as quickly as they can. So congratulations to MKS, SI Learn, Xiaoyu, Seal, and Bombi. Hopefully this ends up working out for them, and best of luck to them in the lower division of Southeast Asia. It's a difficult one. I was a big fan of the lower division of Southeast Asia in the previous tour, and I'm curious to see how it goes. Again, pretty sad that one of my favorite teams, Orca, isn't going to be there, but with everything that happened, it's understandable why that had to be done. So yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Again, power rankings starting up tomorrow, and they're going to be on every single Friday. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow with some power rankings.